Hello everybody, I've just done a whole live sessions and the camera died and I think I got like 3 minutes and here I'm talking like an idiot for 24. So sorry for everybody who's been waiting. I just saw that all these comments came up. Let me just check if it's working. Yeah, it looks like it's working. There's a wave. Annelie has joined. I haven't turned my camera around. Annelie, hello. Because I can't look at myself and think about what I want to say. So I will just have to redo this talk today. For some of you who do not know me, my name is Yualida. I am a clinical psychologist, a neuropsychologist, and an artist. And I'm launching my website with a series of experimental talks on Instagram Live. And the aim is to bring together art and psychology. And because it is Mental Health Awareness Month and it was Mother's Day on Sunday, I thought it was very fitting that I discuss this painting today. Let me just check again, see if everything's good. Yes. So I want to talk about this painting today. The name is Mother. It's a painting about my mother, and as I've spoken before about the red coat, we all know that I've got a bit of an obsession. My mother had this amazing velvet red coat that was floor length with a skirt that started under her bodice all the way down to the floor, and I still have this outfit. And I've never had the confidence to wear it other than to maybe a wedding and a Halloween party. And so in my mind, this red coat symbolizes this extraordinary confidence that she had and that I can clearly remember growing up as a child. For those of you who may know me, my mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's when I was 12 years old. I think she was quite young as well. I think she was 45. And she had a couple of good years, but by the time I was about 14, 15, 16, she became very ill and really extraordinarily so. And I was the only child in the house with her. My parents divorced a few years before, so my mum was alone. My sisters were at university, so I was really left with this very sick mother at an age when, I wanted to go out and be with my friends. And I had absolutely no tools in how to handle this. And I think I really resented this very much. And it is only years later, when I was in my mid-20s, late 20s, when I was working, I was 30, when I was working at the neurology hospital in London, where one day I walked in to my office and they had moved the movement disorders clinic from another floor to our floor because of building work. And as I walked into the corridor, there were all these women, about 8 of them sitting, and they all look exactly like my mother. They all had this kind of stooped over, thin shoulders, this kind of thinned out look, the kind of constant movement, this kind of perpetual motion, the thin, almost translucent skin, the paleness in the face, the kind of sunken in jawline, and the very thin, frail hair, and that characteristic, and I'll never forget this, the glistening, the glow of the sweat on the brow, which was, just the exhaustion of having to deal with this movement constantly. And as I looked at these women, I realized they are all my mother. They look exactly like her. And I think that was the instant when I realized that what the resentment I felt towards my mother wasn't her, it was a disease. That my mother had been taken away a long time before I realized. And that, I think, was the start of my healing, my journey, to work with this kind of anger that I had towards her for getting sick. And it's not uncommon, when you're an adolescent, the world is about you. And I really struggled with the fact that my future was changed because of her course. And I held it against her. But, anybody who knows neurodevelopmental illnesses and who understands what it does to people will know that there really is no room for empathy. There's no room for kindness on that journey. It is a brutal and uncompromising illness that takes people apart bit by bit. And as a child growing up, that was excruciatingly difficult to see. And I think I went through life thinking that I had processed quite a lot of this. But actually, I think there was something inside me that I was holding on to. And as I spoke to you before, I made this beautiful series of paintings. Let me just check if it's working. Yes, I'm still live. Hi there. I made this series of palette knife artworks. My son is here and he's tiptoeing. So I made this series of palette knife artworks, which was very easy to do right at the beginning of this journey when I made this decision to do art again. And I remember I used to watch my grandfather work with a palette knife, so it came very easy for me. And and I was quite delighted that after so many years I could do this. And afterwards I explained to you how I was really confused. I didn't know what was going on. What kind of artist did I want to be? And it was a real issue for me. And I then went and experimented with different styles, different mediums. I was making drawings, I was doing charcoal, and I was just trying to loosen up. And as I was working, the one day a thought came to me and it said, you need to forgive your mother. And on one level it took me by surprise and I was a bit offended. And on another level I knew exactly what this voice was talking about. And I then suddenly realized that I looked at my son across the dinner table and realized that he's that age now that I was when my mother was diagnosed. And I suddenly realized that we have this incredible relationship where we are finding each other, where it's not the same relationship as I had with him as a child, which is about being of service. This was a meeting of minds. This was us grappling with who he is becoming as a person and who I am as a person. What are our strengths? What are our similarities? Why are we clashing on certain levels? How are we going to negotiate that? And I realized what an absolute blessing that is when you can have this kind of relationship with your parents. And I was denied that with my mother. And I realized Parkinson's prevented me from having that relationship with my mother. And that awareness sort of made me realize the age that I am now is the age when she was at her most ill. And I started wondering how terrible that must have been for her, to have this teenager in the house who really needs her and she not being able to actually engage with that she was under threat. She was being taken apart alive. And that's how it felt. There was nothing kind about that process. And there was very little kindness in our relationship growing up in a house, me having to witness and work with that. And so I went to bed early. Of course, I bawled my eyes out. Everybody thought I'd gone crazy. And the very next morning, when you have those dreams where it's just before waking time and it's very real, it's very almost like lucid, and it can be a second, but it feels like forever. And I remember that moment just before waking with my son's face right in my head saying, "Mommy, I'm hungry, give me food." And it was that split second where my mom was standing next to me, next to my bed, and it was like she was holding something, like she was either giving me something or showing me something. And I got up and I couldn't get this image out of my head, and I imagined she had this red coat on. I could have been fabricating that, but she had a robe on and she had her hands like this. And I, of course, first made breakfast and then said, I need to paint this. And this painting painted itself in 12 hours. I started at 8 in the morning when I took a photo of myself with the red robe on, and I finished it at 8 that evening. And to start with, I wanted to do like a face with like a vague outline and having a kind of a veil over her head. And the metaphor for that was there was multiple ideas around it, because my mum used to make these hats with these veils, and they had these gold threads and beads in for funerals, and I always thought they were just the most magnificent things they would put down, and then they would lift it up and reveal the face. On another level, I wanted to show that my mother was talking to me from another place, that there was a veil between us, but that there was some communication that was coming through. Let me just check my phone. Yeah, I'm still there. And on the other hand, when I started to do the features, and I wanted to do the features just coming through a little bit, but I really struggled with that, and I realized it was because I couldn't imagine what my mother looked like. I had no fixed image of my mother. I think Parkinson's changed her so much from the age of 12 that she had these different looks to me. And by the end, the image that I remember is that image of all those old ladies sitting in the waiting room in the Department of Neurology in London. And I realized that wasn't her, that was Parkinson's. And then as I started just playing around with this idea of this lace and this netting, it sort of shaped itself and it almost looked like a snakeskin that was sort of wrapped around her. And for me that was very fitting, because the snake shades its skin, it changes over time, and the interesting thing was that on a level, when a snake shades its skin, it becomes bigger. But my mum, as she was shedding her skin, she was becoming frailer and smaller. And there was something about sort of the demise in the bodily journey and something about their growth in the spiritual journey. And I thought that I really liked this idea that it mirrored this kind of snake skin, which is all about transformation, rebirth, and expanding. And for me, the snake has a personal symbolism, and I think I've spoken a bit about that. The snake has often come to me in dreams and meditations at very distinct periods of time when I have been struggling with certain issues. And of course it's here, and it's coming from the inside, and the snake here tells me that it's very close to where my mother is, that she's in a state of transformation, and that the snake is there to tell us that this is an artwork of personal importance. And I like very much the idea that this snake's skin is the same as this snake, but this must be a very big snake, and this is quite a small snake, and perhaps there's something about the frailness of her journey in the physical world, and perhaps the expansion of her journey in the other world, or the spiritual world. And then the lilies just made an appearance when I was thinking of the background. The lily used to be my mother's favorite flower, and I often painted lilies when I was younger in high school. And when I looked into the symbolism of the daylily, because I was, it sort of just came at me when I was doing the background. And it actually means it's a symbol of a mother's devotion and sacrifices for her children. So I thought that was quite beautiful, and it represents filial love, the love a mother will have for her children. And then the hands, some people have commented that the hands look like Egon Schiele. It has that kind of very strong abstract expressionism quality. I think that's just my bony hands. But I wanted, and I was quite pleased that it looked like that, because it also represents the fact that my mother worked with her hands. She made a living with her hands, and she made the most beautiful objects with her hands. She made flowers, paper flowers, and flowers out of material that she would put on hats. She made hats. She made gloves that she would embroider on. She made garter belts. She made shoes that she would upholster, and she would bead them. She made these amazing bodices, almost like corsets. And I've got a whole corset series coming, which I will talk to you in a separate Instagram post. And then she would sculpt, as I told you, these dresses over these women. And she did all of this with her hands. She wasn't trained. So it all came out of her naturally. And then when I was drawing this, in my mind I had thought it was a nautilus shell. and that she was holding the nautilus shell, and that it represents something about infinity, and that you can do whatever you want, you know, that you can think of, kind of thing. But as I started drawing it, I realized that was wrong. It's not what it was, and it was a lotus flower. And I made it blue to really contrast with the red. But then when I started reading up about the lotus flower, and I did it only yesterday in preparation for this talk, it was quite amazing, the symbolism around the lotus flower. It is just packed with symbolism across all traditions, and especially Buddhism and Hinduism. It represents the journey of spirituality, birth, death, rebirth, and the closed lotus flower means the beginning of the journey, and then the open lotus flower means sort of the culmination of that journey. And in the Hindu tradition, there's a beautiful saying that the purity of the lotus flower is because it's this flower where the roots grow in the dirtiest of soil, but it gives off the purest of flowers. So it has a very special place in Hindu culture because it represents the human potential and the human condition, that only the best of things can come from the darkest of places, which I thought was really beautiful in many ways. And then another thing that really quite moved me, in the Buddhist tradition, there is the Tibetan chant, not the Buddhist tradition. In the Tibetan chant, Mani Padme Om, the chant is asking the blue lotus to provide inner determination for the journey that you will be going on. And that really moved me, because I thought if there was any way to describe my mother and her journey through her illness, it was inner determination. She never really made it my problem, although I felt she had. And she managed it with so much grace and almost like determination. I cannot quite put it across in words, this kind of ability that she had for over 25 years to live with this condition and to manage it and to always do it gracefully. And so the lotus flower, she's not only holding it, I'm almost imagining that she's giving it to me. She's giving to me this kind of journey, that the courage to continue on with the journey. And I think the whole painting, from the snake to this and the flowers, is a message, a handing over of creativity, a handing over of something that she couldn't hand over to me when I was a teenager or growing up, because Parkinson's got in the way. But now, in her death, or now while I'm in adulthood, I have an opportunity to recreate that relationship and to draw on her creativity and the spiritual nature of what she represents to me here, and draw on the femininity. And her shop, and where I grew up, it was all about the feminine energy, the feminine strength to be able to bring to fruition that which you love. And I think that is so beautifully represented in the blue lotus flower. And of course the butterfly is there to remind me of gentleness, to step gently into this world, that to have a kind of reverence for your own internal world and your own internal journey. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is, you know, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. We don't talk about the massive impact that mental health can have on families and on individuals. And we don't talk enough about mothers and how our relationship with our mothers shape and determine the relationships we will have with our children. And I think the beauty of art is that it has this transformative power to change how you see or how you've experienced certain things in the past. And since painting this picture, it feels like something has shifted. But able to look my mother in the eye as an adult of 50 and look at the ill mother when she was 50, and actually forgive that. I think I've opened my heart. It's almost like that cage opening up and the bird flying. You can let that go. And I'm wondering if that was the gift she was giving. You can let that go now, and you can go on your journey with inner determination and do what you love. So I want you guys to take this to heart. Maybe when you look at this painting, or look at a red coat, or look at a flower, remember that you have the power to rework what you think might be a fixed fact of the past, that you can change it and go and get from there, from that dirty water, you can go and get the purest of nuggets to take forward with you on your journey. Have a good Friday. Lots of love. Bye. Okay, and stop.